I used to think that true love was about sacrifice. That if you just poured enough of yourself into another person, into their family, into their home, eventually, the hollow spaces would fill up with respect and affection. I was wrong. The reality is, if you make yourself a doormat, people won't thank you for your softness. They will just wipe their muddy shoes on you and complain that you aren't thick enough to absorb the dirt. For 3 brutal, exhausting years, I scrubbed floors, swallowed bitter insults, and shrank myself down to fit into a life that was never meant for me. I traded my identity, my family, and my pride for a man who, in the end, didn't even have the basic human decency to listen to me. If someone had told me that on the exact day I discovered I was carrying his child, I would end up standing in the middle of his sprawling, pretentious living room, stripped down to my lace underwear, hurling a diamond ring at his face, I would have called them certifiably insane. But life has a remarkably twisted sense of humor, and my awakening was going to be violently abrupt. The house I shared with Liam, his mother Margaret, and his younger sister Chloe was a massive, sterile monument to new money and old prejudices. It was located in an upscale suburb where the lawns were perfectly manicured and the hearts of the residents were entirely synthetic. When Liam and I first met, he was charming, attentive, and seemingly grounded. He was an ambitious architect, and well, to them, I was a nobody. I had intentionally presented myself as a simple girl with no real family ties to speak of, working a modest job at a bookstore. I never told them where I really came from. I wanted Liam to love me for me, not for my background, and I'd burned the bridge to my past so thoroughly that the ashes had long blown away. But the moment the ink dried on our marriage certificate and I moved into his family estate, the fairy tale shattered. Liam's mother, Margaret, was a woman who wore her condescension like expensive perfume, overpowering and impossible to escape. To her, I was an interloper, a charity case her golden boy had taken pity on. Liam likes his eggs poached, darling, not boiled into rubber, Margaret would sigh every morning, inspecting the breakfast I had spent an hour preparing. But I suppose where you come from, culinary finesse isn't exactly a priority. Just try not to ruin his stomach before his big meeting. I would bite the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper, forcing a smile. I'll do better tomorrow, Margaret. Then there was Chloe, 22, spoiled rotten, and deeply resentful that she had to share her brother's wallet with a wife. She treated me worse than the hired help, mostly because she couldn't fire me, so she settled for torturing me. I was the one who picked up her dry cleaning, who ironed her silk blouses because the maid always left creases, who quietly cleaned up the kitchen after her late-night drunken parties so Liam wouldn't find out and yell at her. And Liam, my husband, the man I had given up everything for, simply turned a blind eye. He was always too stressed, too tired, or too busy to intervene. Whenever I tried to tell him how isolated I felt, how his mother's barbed comments were chipping away at my sanity, he would sigh heavily, run a hand through his hair, and pull out the same exhausted excuse. "You're being too sensitive, baby," he would say, kissing my forehead with a dismissive pat. "Mom is just particular and Chloe is young. You have free room and board, a beautiful house, and me. What more could you want? Just try to get along with them, please, for my sake." So I did. I folded myself into a smaller, quieter version of a human being. I became the Cinderella of a sprawling suburban mansion, convincing myself that this was just an extended adjustment period. I believed that if I proved my devotion, if I was perfectly patient and infinitely kind, they would eventually see my worth. I isolated myself completely, having no friends to confide in. Entirely relying on the scraps of affection Liam tossed my way when we were alone behind our bedroom door. Then came the morning of our 3rd anniversary. I woke up feeling profoundly different. There was a strange fluttering heaviness in my stomach, accompanied by a wave of nausea that sent me sprinting to the master bathroom. My hands were trembling violently as I dug through the cabinet for a pregnancy test I had bought weeks ago and hidden beneath a stack of towels. I sat on the cold marble floor, the bathroom clock ticking so loudly it sounded like a hammer against my skull. 3 minutes, it felt like 3 lifetimes. When I finally looked down at the small plastic stick, my breath hitched in my throat. 2 pink lines. Tears hot, unbidden, and utterly overwhelming spilled down my cheeks. I pressed a hand to my mouth to stifle a sob. I was pregnant. I was going to be a mother. In that fragile, crystalline moment, the years of humiliation, the coldness of Margaret's glares, the sting of Chloe's mockery, it all vanished. This is it, I thought, foolishly, desperately. This is the miracle we needed. A child would change everything. Liam would finally stand up and be the protector we needed. We would move out, get our own place, and become a real family. I spent the entire day in a state of euphoric anticipation. I didn't care when Margaret complained that the floors were too slippery, or when Chloe demanded I run to town to fetch her a specific brand of sparkling water. I just smiled, a secret glowing warmth radiating from my chest. I spent hours preparing a lavish dinner. I roasted Liam's favorite duck, baked a rich chocolate tart, and set the dining table with the good crystal. I took a long shower, washing away the smell of bleach and servitude, and slipped into a beautiful emerald green silk dress Liam had bought me for our first anniversary. I applied my makeup with trembling hands, practicing how I would break the news. I imagined his face lighting up. I imagined him sweeping me into his arms, spinning me around, promising me the world. By 7 p.m., everything was perfect. By 8 p.m., the duck was getting cold. By 9 p.m., I was sitting alone at the sprawling mahogany table, the silence of the house pressing against my eardrums. Margaret and Chloe were out at a country club gala, leaving me entirely alone with my fading illusions. At 9:30 p.m., I finally heard the heavy oak front door swing open. My heart leaped into my throat. I smoothed down my dress, touched my stomach lightly for courage, and practically ran to the foyer, the words "I'm pregnant" burning on the tip of my tongue. But as I turned the corner into the grand entryway, the smile froze on my face. The words died in my throat, choking me. Liam wasn't alone. Standing next to my husband, clutching his arm with an alarming, intimate desperation, was a stunningly beautiful woman. She had golden hair, tear-stained cheeks, and most glaringly obvious of all, a deeply rounded, heavily pregnant belly pushing against her designer maternity coat. Liam looked up, freezing when he saw me standing there in my emerald dress. He looked terrified. The woman looked at me, then up at Liam, her grip tightening on his jacket. "Liam?" I whispered, my voice trembling, the ground beneath my feet suddenly feeling like it was opening up to swallow me whole. "Who is this?" For a full agonizing minute, the only sound in the grand entry was the frantic ticking of the grandfather clock. My eyes darted from Liam's pale, sweat-sheen face to the heavy, rounded belly of the blonde woman clinging to his arm. My own stomach holding my fragile, hours-old secret tightened into a painful knot. "Liam," I repeated, my voice cracking, the emerald silk of my dress suddenly feeling like a straitjacket. "What is going on?" "Who is she?" Liam swallowed hard, refusing to meet my eyes. He gently detached the woman's manicured claws from his coat and took a hesitant step toward me. This is Evelyn," he stammered, running a shaky hand through his hair. "It's Marcus's fiancé, Marcus. There was an accident last night. A massive heart attack. He didn't make it." My mind spun. Marcus, Liam's wildly wealthy, notoriously reckless best friend. "Oh my God," I breathed, the anger momentarily giving way to genuine human empathy. "Liam, I am so incredibly sorry. But why is she here, with her bags?" "She has no one else," Liam said quickly, defensively. "Marcus's family is in London and they never approved of her. The bank froze his accounts. She's heavily pregnant, terrified, and grieving. I told her she could stay with us until she gets back on her feet. It's what Marcus would have wanted." I opened my mouth to speak, to ask why he hadn't called me, to ask how long she was staying, to scream that tonight was supposed to be our night. I needed to tell him about our baby. But before a single word could escape my lips, the front door swung open again. A gust of chilly night air blew in, carrying the scent of expensive gin and Margaret's suffocating floral perfume. "Liam, darling, we saw your car." Margaret's voice echoed through the hall, stopping abruptly as she took in the scene. Her eyes bypassed me entirely, locking onto the sobbing blonde. I expected shock. I expected my mother-in-law to demand an explanation for why a strange pregnant woman was standing in her foyer. Instead, Margaret dropped her clutch, her face lighting up with a sickeningly sweet, entirely rehearsed expression of pity. "Oh, Evelyn, my poor, sweet girl," she cooed, rushing forward with arms wide open. Liam texted me on the way from the hospital. "Come here, darling, you are safe now." "You are family." Chloe followed right behind her mother, immediately grabbing Evelyn's Louis Vuitton duffel bags she would never dream of carrying if they belonged to me. "We got the guest room ready just like you asked, Liam," Chloe chirped, casting a venomous glare in my direction. "The one with the good heating. Not like the drafty little closet some people are used to." The breath was knocked completely out of my lungs. They knew. Liam had texted his mother and sister, coordinated a room for this woman, and deliberately left his wife in the dark, standing over a cold anniversary dinner with a positive pregnancy test burning a hole in my pocket. The pieces fell into place with terrifying speed. Margaret had always wanted Liam to marry within their elite social circle. Evelyn, Marcus's glittering fiancée, fit that mold perfectly. Widowed or not, carrying another man's child or not, she was everything they wanted me to be. And looking at the way Margaret stroked Evelyn's hair, I realized this wasn't an emergency rescue. This was a hostile takeover. "Liam, please," I whispered, stepping closer to him, my voice trembling with a desperate plea. "I need to talk to you, alone, right now, up in our room. There is something I have to tell you." Evelyn's theatrical sobs hitched. She pulled back from Margaret's embrace, dabbing her dry eyes with a tissue. She looked at Liam, her bottom lip quivering perfectly. "I'm so sorry, Liam," she whimpered, her voice dripping with artificial innocence. "I'm ruining your evening. Your wife clearly hates me. I should just go sleep in my car. It's fine. My baby and I will survive. Don't be ridiculous." Margaret snapped, turning to glare at me with pure vitriol. "You aren't going anywhere. If anyone has a problem with a grieving widow seeking shelter, they know exactly where the front door is." Liam rubbed his temples, looking at me with exhausted annoyance. "Can we not do this tonight? Please? I just lost my best friend. Have a heart. Just go upstairs, I'll be up later." He turned his back on me to pick up the rest of Evelyn's luggage. Margaret and Chloe flanked him, chattering about tea and warm blankets. I was left standing there, entirely invisible in my own home. My blood boiled. The sheer injustice of it all, the utter disrespect, it broke the dam of my patience. I marched right up to Evelyn as Liam walked toward the stairs. "You are not sleeping in his car, and you know it," I said, my voice low and shaking with suppressed rage. "But you and I need to set some ground rules if you're staying in my house." As I approached her, the pathetic, grieving widow facade vanished instantly. Evelyn's eyes hardened into icy blue daggers. When she was sure Margaret and Liam were looking away, she leaned in close to me. I could smell the sharp tang of peppermints on her breath. "Your house?" Evelyn whispered viciously, a cruel smirk twisting her lips. "Enjoy it while it lasts, sweetie. You're just a placeholder. He was always meant to be mine." Shock paralyzed me. I instinctively recoiled, taking a step back in sheer disgust. My shoulder barely brushed against hers, a feather-light touch. But it was all she needed. Evelyn's smirk vanished, replaced by a mask of sheer terror. She let out a blood-curdling, theatrical shriek and violently threw herself backward. She crashed onto the hard marble floor of the foyer, landing heavily on her side, clutching her pregnant belly and wailing in fabricated agony. "Oh my God, my baby," she screamed, thrashing on the floor. "Why did you push me? Liam, help me." The foyer erupted into absolute chaos. Liam dropped the bags with a deafening crash, sprinting down the stairs and dropping to his knees beside her. Margaret shrieked, clutching her pearls while Chloe whipped around, pointing a manicured finger directly at my face. "Are you insane?" Chloe screamed, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "She's pregnant, you psycho." "I didn't touch her," I cried out, my hands flying up to my mouth in horror. I stepped forward, desperate to explain. "Liam, I swear to you, I didn't push her." She stepped toward me, she whispered something, and then she just threw herself down. "It's a setup." Liam gently helped Evelyn sit up. She was burying her face in his chest, sobbing hysterically, clinging to his shirt. He looked up at me, and the expression on his face made my heart shatter into a million irreparable pieces. There was no love there. No trust, just pure, unadulterated disgust. "You're pathetic," Liam snarled, his voice laced with venom. "I knew you were jealous, I knew you were insecure, but I never thought you were a monster. She just lost her fiancé." "Liam, she's lying," I begged, tears finally spilling over my eyelashes, hot and stinging. "Please, just listen to me for 1 second. Shut up." He roared, his voice shaking the crystal chandelier above us. He stood up, towering over me, his face dark with fury. "You will not say another word. You will apologize to her, right now. You will get down on your knees and apologize to Evelyn, or so help me God." I stood frozen, the cold marble seeping through my shoes, staring at the man I had devoted 3 years of my life to. The man carrying the father of my unborn child. I looked past him, catching a glimpse of Evelyn peering over his shoulder. Through her fake tears, the grieving widow looked right at me and smiled. "Get on your knees." The words echoed off the high, vaulted ceilings of the foyer, hanging in the suffocating air like a judge's final sentence. Liam stood over me, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with a dark, unfamiliar contempt. On the floor beside him, Evelyn continued her pathetic performance, letting out theatrical little whimpers while burying her face against his leg. Margaret and Chloe flanked them like heavily perfumed gargoyles, their faces twisted in identical sneers of disgust. In that frozen fraction of a second, the universe seemed to tilt on its axis. The heavy, desperate love I had carried for this man, the love that had made me swallow my pride, scrub their floors, and isolate myself from my past evaporated. It didn't fade away. It violently shattered, leaving behind a cold, crystalline clarity. I pressed my fingers against my stomach, shielding the tiny, secret life growing inside me. I will not let my child be born into this swamp of lies, I thought. I will not raise a baby in a house where its mother is treated like a rabid dog. Something inside me snapped. Not a loud, messy break, but a quiet, irreversible severing of the invisible strings that had kept me dancing for them for 3 years. I slowly straightened my posture, wiping the stray tears from my cheeks. I looked at Liam not with the pleading eyes of a terrified wife, but with the hollow, terrifying calm of a stranger. "I will never apologize to a snake," I said, my voice dropping to a low, steady whisper that somehow cut through the silence louder than a scream. "And I will certainly never kneel for a coward." Liam flinched as if I had struck him. "Excuse me?" He snarled, taking a threatening step forward. "You heard me," I said, the words tasting like freedom on my tongue. "This whole thing is a pathetic setup. She didn't fall, and you know it. You orchestrated this. You moved your dead best friend's pregnant mistress into our home on our anniversary, and you expected me to just quietly serve her tea. I am done, Liam. I want a divorce." For a moment, absolute silence reigned. And then a sound I will never forget bubbled up from Liam's throat. He laughed. It was a cruel, mocking, ugly sound. Chloe joined in, a high-pitched giggle of pure malice, while Margaret simply shook her head in theatrical disbelief. "A divorce?" Liam mocked, stepping over Evelyn's legs to close the distance between us. He looked me up and down like I was a piece of garbage that had blown in from the street. "Are you actually out of your mind? A divorce with what money? You have nothing. You are nothing without me. Where are you going to go? Back to the filthy little studio apartment I rescued you from? Back to shelving books for minimum wage?" He leaned in, his breath hot against my face. "You wouldn't last a week out there. You have nowhere to go and not a single dime to your name. You'll be begging at my door by tomorrow morning. Let the trash take itself out." "Liam," Margaret barked, her eyes gleaming with triumphant cruelty. She stepped forward, pointing a manicured finger at me. "But hear me well, you ungrateful little gold digger. If you walk out that door tonight, you walk out with exactly what you brought into this family. Nothing. Every piece of clothing, every piece of jewelry, every single thing in this house was paid for by my son's hard-earned money. You leave it all right here." Evelyn, sensing her victory, finally stopped fake crying. She sat up slightly, a wicked, victorious gleam in her eyes as she waited for me to break down, to beg for forgiveness, to surrender to their impossible ultimatum. They expected me to cry. They expected me to crumble. Instead, I reached behind my neck. With a swift, fluid motion, I unclasped the delicate diamond necklace Liam had given me for my birthday and let it clatter onto the marble floor. Chloe gasped. Without breaking eye contact with my husband, I reached behind my back, grasped the zipper of my elegant emerald silk dress, and pulled it down. "Are you insane?" Margaret shrieked, taking a step back as the heavy silk slipped off my shoulders and pooled in a shimmering puddle at my feet. I stepped out of the dress, wearing nothing but a matching set of black lace underwear. The freezing air of the foyer hit my bare skin, but I felt absolutely nothing but a searing, blinding heat radiating from my core. I kicked off the expensive designer heels, sending them skidding across the floor to hit Evelyn's duffel bags. "This dress?" "Yours," I said, my voice ringing with a terrifying authority they had never heard before. "The shoes?" "Yours. The necklace? Yours." I looked down at my left hand. The heavy 3-carat diamond engagement ring felt like a shackle. I gripped it tightly, ripping it off my finger with such force it scraped my knuckle. And this miserable, suffocating, fake life? I looked Liam dead in the eye, watching the mocking smirk finally slide off his face, replaced by a flicker of genuine shock. I threw the ring directly at his chest. It hit him hard and bounced away into the darkness of the hallway. That's yours, too. Standing there, stripped down to my bare skin and my rawest pride, I reached into the pocket of the discarded silk dress and pulled out my cell phone, the cheap, battered thing I had bought with my own bookstore wages before I ever met him. I dialed a number I had memorized but hadn't dared to call in 3 long, painful years. The phone rang once, twice. Yes? A deep, familiar, strictly professional voice answered on the other end. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out loud and clear for the entire stunned foyer to hear. It's me. I'm done playing pretend. Come get me. I hung up, dropping the phone onto the pile of clothes. I crossed my arms over my chest, standing barefoot on the freezing marble, staring down the family that thought they had destroyed me. Who the hell was that? Liam demanded, his voice trembling slightly, the bravado slipping. Are you calling a cab you can't even pay for? I smiled. It was a cold, dangerous smile that sent a visible shiver down Chloe's spine. We wait 10 minutes, I whispered. And then you'll see exactly who I am. The next 10 minutes stretched into an agonizing eternity. The heavy silence of the foyer was broken only by the rhythmic, mocking tick of the grandfather clock and Margaret's dramatic sighs. Chloe had pulled out her phone, aggressively texting someone while casting disgusted glances at my near-naked body shivering on the cold marble. Liam paced back and forth, trying to project an air of dominant irritation, but I could see the nervous twitch in his jaw. He didn't know what I was waiting for, but the sheer, unblinking defiance in my eyes was starting to unnerve him. This is absurd, Margaret finally hissed, aggressively swirling the ice in a glass of gin she had poured herself. Call the police, Liam. Have this hysterical, stripped-down lunatic removed for trespassing. Evelyn shouldn't have to look at this. Liam stopped pacing and reached for his phone, his face hardening. You're right. I'm done playing your stupid games. He never finished his sentence. Before his thumb could even unlock the screen, the heavy oak double doors of the mansion were violently thrown open. They hit the interior walls with a deafening crack that made Chloe scream and drop her phone. The chilling night wind howled into the grand entryway, but it was nothing compared to the storm that had just arrived. 4 men in immaculate, tailored black suits stormed into the foyer. They moved with terrifying, synchronized precision, radiating a cold, professional menace that instantly sucked the oxygen out of the room. They didn't say a word. They simply formed a wall between me and my husband's stunned family. What the hell is this? Liam yelled, stumbling backward, his false bravado vanishing in an instant. Who are you? Get out of my house before I shoot you. The men didn't flinch. They simply parted down the middle. Footsteps echoed from the stone porch outside, slow, deliberate, and dripping with authority. A young man stepped through the doorway, and the entire atmosphere of the room shifted. He was stunningly handsome, dressed in a bespoke charcoal 3-piece suit that probably cost more than Liam's car. His dark eyes swept over the room, dismissing Liam, Margaret, and the terrified Evelyn in a fraction of a second before locking onto me. When he saw me standing there, shivering in my lace underwear with my discarded life piled at my feet, his expression didn't show pity. It showed absolute lethal fury. He did look at Liam. He walked straight toward me, his heavy leather shoes clicking against the marble. Without a single word, he shrugged off his thick, cashmere suit jacket and wrapped it tightly around my freezing shoulders. The fabric smelled of cedar, expensive cologne, and a safety I hadn't felt in 3 agonizing years. He pulled the lapels together, shielding my body, and pulled me into a fierce, protective embrace. I've got you, he whispered, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. Let's get out of here. The shock that had paralyzed Liam's family finally broke, replaced by a volcanic eruption of offended entitlement. Margaret screeched, pointing a trembling, manicured finger at us, her face purple with rage. I knew it. I absolutely knew it, you lying, scheming little harlot. This is your lover. You've been dragging my son's name through the mud while sleeping with this thug. Liam's face contorted into an ugly mask of wounded pride and jealousy. Seeing me wrapped in the arms of a man who effortlessly outclassed him in every conceivable way shattered his fragile ego. He practically lunged toward the hall table, yanking open a drawer and pulling out his checkbook. His hands were shaking so violently he could barely hold the pen. Is this what this is about? Liam roared, furiously scribbling on the paper, tearing it from the binding with a violent rip. He marched up to the wall of bodyguards, trying to look intimidating, but he looked like a panicked boy throwing a tantrum. You want money to go start a new life with your whore? Fine. Liam shoved his hand past the guard's shoulder, holding the slip of paper inches from my face. $100,000, Liam spat, his eyes wide and manic. Take it and get the hell out of my house. And if you ever show your face near me, my mother, or Evelyn again, I will bury you in legal fees so deep you'll never see daylight. Take your payout and leave. The handsome man beside me tensed, his jaw locking, ready to step forward and destroy Liam where he stood. But I placed a gentle hand on his chest, stopping him. I stepped out from behind the protective wall of suits, clutching the oversized cashmere jacket around my shoulders. I reached out and calmly took the check from Liam's trembling fingers. I looked down at the chaotic scrawl. $100,000, the price of my dignity. The price of my 3 years of servitude. I looked up, meeting Liam's desperate, furious eyes. And I smiled. With a slow, deliberate motion, I ripped the check right down the middle. Margaret gasped. Chloe's jaw dropped. Liam blinked, completely uncomprehending. I placed the two pieces together and tore them again, and again, until the paper was nothing but useless, jagged confetti in my palm. I stepped directly into Liam's personal space. He flinched, instinctively leaning away from the fire in my eyes. Keep your pennies, Liam, I whispered, my voice dripping with absolute poison. I raised my hand and threw the torn shreds of paper directly into his face. They fluttered down onto his expensive shoes like dirty snow. Where I'm going, this wouldn't even cover the tip. Enjoy your new life. You perfectly deserve each other. I turned my back on the man I had once loved, on the house that had been my prison, and on the pathetic people who thought they had broken me. I didn't look back as I walked out the massive oak doors, flanked by the security team, stepping out into the cool, liberating night air. A fleet of sleek, black SUVs idled in the driveway, their headlights cutting through the darkness. My savior opened the door to the lead car, offering me his hand. I climbed into the buttery leather interior, the door slamming shut behind me, sealing me away from the nightmare. As the convoy accelerated down the manicured driveway, leaving the estate in the dust, the adrenaline finally crashed. I pressed my hands to my face, burying my sobs into the sleeves of the oversized jacket, weeping not for the man I lost, but for the girl I had forced myself to be. The drive was a blur of neon city lights reflecting off the tinted windows. The young man sitting beside me didn't press for details. He just let me cry until the violent shaking in my chest finally subsided. He poured me a glass of water from the sleek console, his expression a mix of deep sorrow and protective rage. It's over now, Artem whispered, wrapping his arm around my shoulders and pulling me against his side. I've got you, little sister. You're safe. I leaned against my brother, the exhaustion of 3 years of pretending finally crushing me. I was so stupid, Artem. I wanted to prove I could do it on my own. I wanted to build a life from the ground up, to have a man love me just for me, without the money or the name. He's a fool, Artem said firmly, his jaw set as he stared out the window into the dark. And he's going to regret tonight for the rest of his miserable life. An hour later, the convoy turned off the main highway, winding up a secluded, heavily wooded road. The massive wrought iron gates of our family estate loomed in the darkness, swinging open silently to admit us. As we pulled up the long, sweeping driveway, the sheer scale of my childhood home a sprawling stone mansion that made Liam's pretentious suburban house look like a cheap plastic toy came into view. Standing on the front steps, bathed in the warm, golden glow of the porch lights, was my father. He looked slightly older than I remembered from 3 years ago. The silver in his hair more pronounced, but his posture was as rigid and commanding as ever. He was a man who owned half the region's real estate, a titan of industry who could ruin a life with a single phone call. But right now his hands were trembling. He was just a father who had been waiting for his daughter to come home. I stepped out of the SUV, my bare feet touching the cold, manicured stone. I pulled Artem's oversized jacket tighter around my shivering frame. I expected a lecture. I expected the agonizing "I told you so" that I so rightfully deserved when I defied his explicit orders, abandoned my inheritance, and ran off to marry a man he swore was nothing but a self-serving opportunist. Instead, my father's stern face crumbled. He descended the stairs as fast as his legs could carry him and pulled me into an embrace so tight it knocked the remaining wind out of me. "Papa," I sobbed, burying my face in his chest, smelling the familiar, comforting scent of tobacco and peppermint. "I'm so sorry." "You were right. You were right about everything." He murmured fiercely, kissing the top of my head, his own voice thick with emotion. "None of that matters. You are home. That is all I care about." "I'm pregnant, Papa," I whispered into his coat, the reality of the words finally sinking in without the sickening taint of Liam's betrayal. "I'm having a baby." My father pulled back, his eyes widening in shock before softening into an overwhelming, fiercely protective warmth. He rested a heavy, steady hand on my shoulder. "Then this child will be raised with all the love and power in the world," he vowed. His gaze shifted over my shoulder, staring out into the dark night with a terrifying predatory calm. "And as for the miserable little worm who did this to you, he will pay for every single tear you shed tonight." He kept his promise. The fallout was almost poetic in its absolute destruction. It took less than a month for Liam's entire world to completely unravel. Without my constant, invisible labor holding his life together, the cracks in his perfect facade shattered wide open. First came the revelation about Evelyn. The grieving, helpless widow routine didn't last long when Marcus's family lawyers launched a ruthless investigation into his estate. The truth came out like a flood. Marcus had broken off the engagement weeks before his fatal heart attack because he discovered Evelyn had been cheating on him. The baby she was carrying wasn't his heir. It was the result of a sordid affair with a married bartender. She was drowning in debt, utterly desperate, and had zeroed in on Liam's pathetic savior complex to secure a roof over her head. Worse for Liam, the truth about the fall came out too. He'd installed a hidden security camera in the foyer a year prior to watch the cleaning staff, a detail he had entirely forgotten in his panic. When he finally reviewed the footage, he saw it in glaring high definition. Evelyn smirking at me, leaning back, and throwing herself violently to the floor without me ever laying a single finger on her. But the true world-ending shock for my ex-husband came 3 weeks later. It was plastered across the front page of every major business and society magazine in the country. My father had officially announced his gradual retirement, naming me as the vice president and future sole heir of his global holding company. The 2-page spread featured a stunning, high-definition portrait of me sitting behind a massive mahogany desk. I was wearing a tailored designer suit, glowing with the early stages of my pregnancy, looking powerful and completely unrecognizable from the mousy, submissive maid Liam and his mother had discarded. The caption read, "The billion-dollar heiress steps out of the shadows." I heard from Artem that Liam had a total mental breakdown in the middle of his architectural firm when he saw the magazine. The realization that the woman he had mocked for being a penniless nobody, the wife his mother had tortured over grocery bills and cheap clothes, was actually the daughter of the wealthiest man he had ever heard of completely broke his mind. He realized that the nothing he claimed I brought to his life was actually the key to an empire he could only ever dream of. The $100,000 check he had thrown in my face was literal pocket change. The desperate, pathetic attempts to win me back began almost immediately. My phone was flooded with hundreds of agonizing voicemails. He sent long, tear-stained letters, crying about how Evelyn had manipulated him, how he was blind, how he loved me and our unborn child, how he just wanted his family back. He fired his mother from his life, kicked Evelyn out onto the street, and completely isolated himself. One evening, he even showed up at the iron gates of my father's estate in the pouring rain. He dropped to his knees on the wet asphalt, sobbing and begging the security cameras to let him in, offering his own life for just 5 minutes of my time. I stood on the balcony of my bedroom, a warm cup of herbal tea in my hand, wrapped in a luxurious silk robe. I looked down through the rain at the tiny, pathetic figure kneeling in the mud outside my gates. I placed a protective hand over my slightly swelling stomach, feeling a profound, unshakable sense of peace. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel betrayal. I just felt completely, beautifully free. I turned away from the balcony, leaving him out in the cold, and closed the heavy glass doors, shutting out the storm forever. Some things in life are simply too expensive to buy back, and my forgiveness was one of them.